The Incredibles is a genuine masterpiece of cinema. It's a masterful subversion of the superhero genre in just about every way, taking any preconceived notions you may have had and completely flipping them on their head. It's not some stupid superhero movie you're just supposed to turn your brain off and consume without thinking any deeper about it. It's a surprisingly mature, meaningful, and gripping, character-driven family drama that's perfectly intertwined with a tightly written and thrilling main plot, topped off with tightly choreographed action sequences. No character exists just because. They all serve a defined purpose in the story, and they are all given substantive development, going from Mr. Incredible all the way down to the baby, Jack. Calling what he goes through a character arc might be a bit of a stretch, but he's still an important part of the movie and gets his own payoff in the final battle, no matter how insignificant he may have once seemed in the beginning. The characters are exceptional, the plot is as airtight as they come, barring a few annoying contrivances here and there, and the thematic messaging is still relevant almost 2 decades later, naturally woven into the story to tie everything together and create one cohesive film. It's a near-perfect triumph that is arguably the best of Pixar's catalog, and is easily among my favorite films of all time, and yet it is such a tease of an ending. It works perfectly fine as an open-ended, satisfying conclusion, but you also can't help but wonder what comes next. How did the battle against the Underminer unfold? How would the Incredibles fare in this world after having finally been able to come out of hiding? What new challenges will they face along the way, and how will the kids grow and develop as up-and-coming superheroes only recently having gotten a grip of their powers? There was an infinite amount of concepts and lingering questions that could potentially be expanded upon in a sequel. So when Pixar revealed in 2014 that Incredibles 2 was finally coming to fruition, with legendary writer and director Brad Bird back at the helm, people went absolutely insane. The hype was through the roof for this movie. It was the long-awaited sequel to one of Pixar's strongest films, excitement for which was only further exemplified by the almost decade-and-a-half wait between installments. The possibilities were endless for where things could go. We knew it would pick up right where we left off and come out swinging with a battle against the Underminer. But beyond that, what lied next for the Incredibles had limitless potential. No matter what, this was a chance to see our favorite family of superheroes jump into a brand new adventure for the first time ever as a unified team. After working throughout the entire first movie to gain the confidence and synergy needed to battle the Omnidroid together, this would be our chance to see the whole family in action for a full movie. Only for the film to finally come out in June of 2018 and completely fumble the ball in just about every way imaginable. Incredibles 2 isn't just not as good as the original, as so many people have claimed. It's a complete and utter disaster. The story is an incoherent mess that moves lightning fast and yet at the same time is somehow chock full of random nothingness for far too much screen time, and it contradicts both itself and the first film in a million different ways and only get increasingly frustrating the further into this nightmare you get. The themes it tries to communicate are laughable at best and confusing at worst, either because no significant time is spent on any of them, or because the ideas they try to present are directly at odds with the setting and events demonstrated to us throughout the movie. And, of course, the characters have all been thoroughly destroyed. Not Toy Story 4 levels of character assassination, but they've still all been dealt significant amounts of damage that either completely sidelines them, makes them horrifically unlikable jerks, strips away their intelligence, or entirely reverses all of their development from the first movie. And some characters get a package deal for checking multiple boxes, or possibly all the boxes at the same time. All that potential they had was entirely wasted. I'm sure if they had the production time they deserved and didn't get suddenly bumped up on the release schedule thanks to a certain other movie, they could have made this sequel truly worthy of the Incredibles' namesake. But they clearly didn't have that time, and instead all we got was the biggest cinematic disappointment of my life. I've never taken the time to properly sit down and analyze what is so broken about Incredibles 2, and why it pissed me off as much as it did. And now that I have, I've been astounded by just how much is wrong with it from every conceivable angle. There are moments of quality, and I will make no attempt to conceal them to paint the movie as worse than it is, but those little sprinkles are comically dwarfed by the massive tidal wave of issues plaguing every frame of this film. It's time to make some wrong things right. So let's jump into this movie headfirst and bring its problems out into the light. If you've ever wondered why Incredibles 2 didn't have the same impact on you as the first film and you wish you could understand the reasons why, you will, kid. You will. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to finally be able to proudly present to you We begin with the opening logos for both Disney and Pixar. What? We're starting at the logos again? Can't you just begin with the first scene like a normal person instead of ranting about the logos? Well, the thing is, I'm not actually here to criticize them this time. I'm here to praise them. I know, a shocking turn of events, but I said I was going to be pointing out the good things in this movie, and for as insignificant as they may be in the grand scheme of things, these opening titles are very neat. Converting the classic Disney backdrop we're all familiar with into the comic book-esque art style of the original end credits was a crafty yet slight way to pull you back into the world of the Incredibles. An objective that is only further assisted by Michael Giacchino's unmatched musical talent. It's not a blunt, over-the-top, in-your-face gesture like certain other movies, and it doesn't just blatantly rip the old tracks like certain other movies. It's a respectful repurposing of melodies that is just familiar enough to bring you back in, as well as just subtle enough to not be overwhelming and distracting. And what if I told you I actually had praise for the opening scene beyond the title card as well? The story opens with Rick Dicker interrogating Tony Reidinger following the events of the last movie for reasons we'll get into shortly, and it perfectly mirrors the interrogation he conducted with Kari in the Jack Jack Attack short. I will award points for calling back to this short without having it come off as blatant nostalgia pandering, especially since there's a good chance most of the people who went to go see this movie had never watched the original short that it's actually calling back to. It's just a neat little reference for those who understand it, and a logical turn of events for those who don't. Again, I shall award points for this callback. Unfortunately, I am then going to immediately retract those points on account of Pixar miserably failing to keep Tony's model even remotely consistent with how he used to look. See, what happened between the first movie and this one is the same thing that happened between Toy Story 2 and 3. Because of the sweeping technological advancements that have been made in the over a decade that have passed between releases, the old character models were no longer compatible with Pixar's current systems, so every single one of them had to be remade from scratch. Which is why, if you look very closely, you will also notice some minor details about the other characters that make them look just a tiny bit different from how they used to be. But the thing about those characters, and the ones in Toy Story 3, is that there was still a clear effort to maintain the original design so that the average viewer wouldn't be able to notice anything was wrong at all. But everybody picked up on the fact that Tony is just actually not the same human being anymore, which is extremely frustrating in terms of continuity, in the same way that Andy suddenly getting an entirely new character design in Toy Story 4 for no reason was frustrating. I get that they probably wanted to make Tony look more visually appealing than he used to, especially since they didn't really have the time to fully develop the designs for the secondary characters back then, but that doesn't mean you just swap his face out with an entirely different person. Now, look, does this have any impact on the story as a whole? No, it doesn't, but it's still a glaringly obvious inconsistency that I would be remiss to mention, especially since so many people call out how Tony looks so radically different in this movie. Here's another minor thing that's also very annoying.
And I went to watch the track meet.
Oh really? Is that why you decided to walk away towards the parking lot in the exact opposite direction of where the track meet was happening? Alright, enough of the superficial stuff. I should probably give some context for why Tony's being interrogated by Dicker. See, after the scene for the end of the first movie where Tony asked Violet out on a date, the track meet proceeded as expected until the Underminer suddenly emerged from below. We already knew that, but what we didn't know was that apparently, Tony was in the parking lot when this attack happened, and hiding under one of the cars in fear wound up giving him a perfect view of the Incredibles getting ready to confidently leap back into action without a second thought.
Wait, should we be doing this? It is still illegal.
Oh. Never mind then. I guess there actually was some hesitation in that decision, which is very interesting, especially since the one who actually says that line is Helen, because at the end of the last movie, she had her mask on long before Bob did. Not only that, she confidently looked toward him with an expression on her face that clearly said, "Let's do this," having grown from her more reserved personality into the ready-for-action superhero she always was over the course of the story. Yet now, all of a sudden, she's actually not too sure about activating Elastigirl mode due to the fact that superheroes are still illegal. Why is this the case? Well, that'd be because, as it stood, The Incredibles was a complete story with an emotionally satisfying ending that very strongly implied through the positive reception to The Incredibles saving the city from the Omnidroid, the conversation Bob had with Dicker in the car ride home, and the fact that not a single one of the family members hesitated for even a second to leap into action, that superheroes were no longer outlawed by the end of the movie. Or that even if the legislation hadn't properly been amended yet, the stigma surrounding them had evaporated and there was no longer a burning motivation to keep the heroes out of the limelight. And rather than simply utilize that newfound freedom to send the Incredibles out on another action-packed adventure, they decided to reframe the ending of that movie to instead make it seem like the Incredibles were actually still illegal and center the core conflict of the story around that dilemma, as you will soon see. But that conflict cannot work with the ending that you committed to 14 years ago. You can't have the Incredibles leave their house anticipating the possibility of needing to become superheroes since they all apparently had their outfits on underneath their standard clothing, thus explaining how they were able to change so fast in broad daylight, and then try to retcon it by saying that superheroes are actually still illegal, especially not if you're gonna have one of the characters who initiated this decision go from, yeah, let's do this, to, oh, well, actually, maybe we shouldn't do this, I don't know, over the course of literally a few seconds. But then again, it had been 14 years between releases, so maybe they were just hoping you'd forget some of the minor details about the last movie and instead simply accept the situation this sequel's presenting you without a second thought. Gee, where have I heard that before? That's not the only part of the story the writers try to reframe here, because upon Helen asking that question, Bob's response is,
"We're gonna lose it."
Oh, all right.
meaning that he apparently shows no concern whatsoever for the potential legality of their actions and is instead only motivated by the desire to leap into action to help. Now, you could argue that this is because Mr. Incredible doesn't care if being a superhero is against the law or not, because he cares far more about protecting people, no matter what. That would be in line with his character from the first movie. But unfortunately, as we dive further into this story, you're going to see that that is absolutely not the case, and that there is a far more aggravating reason regarding his character writing to explain why the only thing Bob's thinking about in this scene is getting back to doing superhero stuff. But I suppose we'll come back to that at the end of this video, so just keep it in mind for now. Oh, also, I am most definitely going to oscillate between referring to the characters by their real names and their superhero names, and there won't really be much consistency to that, so, just a little warning moving forward. Anyway, Bob convinces Helen that they should help stop the Underminer, so now we're finally gonna get to see the Incredibles work together to battle this new threat as a family, just like we were promised all those years ago. Nope, actually she tells one of her kids to babysit Jack and the other to keep the crowds away from the battle. So even after everything that happened in the first movie, especially during the final act, which could not have happened were it not for the heroic actions of your children, you've elected to ignore all that growth you underwent together as a family in favor of reverting back to telling them to sit here and do basically nothing, since controlling the crowds is a complete waste of time when the drill is actively moving very far away from where they are right now. Awesome. It's just great. I'm so glad I waited 14 years to see 2 of the Incredibles fight crime while the remaining 2 are nothing but glorified babysitters. Except, oh wait, I gave this movie too much credit by mistake, because it's not 2 of the Incredibles fighting the Underminer, it's 1 of them. Helen trampolines Bob up on top of the Underminer's drill before it submerges below ground again while she just stays back. Why? Why are you going with him to help? Spoiler alert, she doesn't do anything between now and the moment when she reunites with Bob. She isn't busy protecting the citizens while Bob battles the Underminer. She literally disappears from the film until they meet up again. So why didn't you go with him into the drill so you could 2v1 the Underminer? Oh wait, I had to stand to my own question, didn't I? You needed to keep her out of the way because if you put her and Bob up against the Underminer, then he never would have stood a chance. Maybe it won't be a big deal. After all, given how strong Bob is demonstrated to be in the first movie, surely he shouldn't even need Helen's help to knock out one little mole dude. Surely that fight would be over before it even begins, right? I don't know. I guess we'll find out later. Bob goes off to battle the Underminer, Helen disappears from the movie, Dash runs off to keep the crowds back, and Violet throws a temper tantrum over being left with the role of babysitting, throwing her mask onto the ground in a fit of rage, but unfortunately for her, she decides to do this right as Tony tries to leave the parking lot, leaving him in the perfect position to catch a glimpse of her without her mask on. Wow! How wonderfully inconvenient. Not only that you decided to get irrationally angry over being stuck with babysitting at the exact moment Tony was nearby, and that of all the cars he wound up hiding behind it happened to be the one right next to you, and that said car was only as convenient as it was because you all decided to run over this way and randomly stop in front of this specific car for absolutely no reason whatsoever, and that this all happened on the exact same day that he finally decided to pay attention to you, and the same day that you finally gathered the courage to go on a date with him. Holy moly, what a tremendously inconvenient series of events. I sure do hope that this string of unluckiness doesn't wind up serving as the crux of your entire character throughout this movie, because that would be really, really silly if that were the case. Anyway, Tony freaks out and runs away because he saw Violet in her superhero costume, thus explaining why he's being interrogated by Rick Dicker.
And it's not like I don't like strong girls. I'm pretty secure, manhood-wise.
Why exactly did you feel the burning need to clarify this for the audience? Was there even a single person watching this movie that thought, oh, Tony only ran away because he was insecure over seeing a strong girl, you see? It makes sense. Did literally anybody think that? Because I'm pretty sure the obvious conclusion anybody with a functioning brain came to was, oh, I see, he saw somebody create a force field with their hands, which happened after watching someone take off at the speed of sound, and after watching someone else turn themselves into a trampoline, and so he rightfully freaked out after seeing all of that, on top of already being severely rattled from watching the Underminer emerge from underground and declare war on humanity, and decided to run away. No? Just me? Okay then, whatever, moving on. Dicker erases his mind, which I'm sure won't have any negative consequences whatsoever, and then one awesome logo and music swell later, we cut to Bob trying to break his way into the Underminer's drill while fighting back against the wave of rocks barreling down upon him. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out too well for him, and he gets thrown to the ground, leaving the Underminer free to Wow, so that's a heaping load of dead people that I am absolutely certain the movie won't just entirely gloss over. That is 4 different buildings, one of which was a bank that he just detonated from below and caused to crumble to pieces. No way you're ever gonna get me to believe that nobody was killed here. You have massive city buildings collapsing below the surface and not even so much as a mention of the carnage that ensued as a result. Unless you want to go the Man of Steel route and try to tell me that actually the important buildings in this densely populated city were entirely empty this entire time, in which case get out of here with that nonsense. That didn't work for Zack Snyder and it certainly ain't gonna work here. Also, why did you even bother blowing up the other 3 buildings when all you wanted to do, as we're going to see in a second, is rob the bank's vault of all its money? Also, really? That was your whole mission the entire time, to rob a bank. I waited 14 years to watch The Incredibles stop a goddamn bank robbery? That's the grand epic battle you built up to all this time? Gee, that's strange. I could have sworn you said something like,
I hereby declare war on peace and happiness!
oh yeah! You declared war on peace and happiness and were so adamant about doing so that you went out of your way to drill up to the surface from below ground, tearing the parking lot and cars apart, and stand up on your stupid little pedestal to make a grand announcement declaring that, when all along your only objective was to rob one measly bank? Are you kidding me? Why did you even bother with the announcement if that was all you wanted to do? You could have very easily surreptitiously drilled into the city, detonated your charges, robbed the bank, and then trailed back to wherever the hell you came from. Making this announcement didn't help you at all. In fact, the only thing it did was hurt you because it caught the attention of the Incredibles. Especially since you had apparently already preemptively placed the charges beneath the buildings ahead of time, since you never placed them down in this movie, but we still see that they're ready to be detonated at a moment's notice. And what do you even want with all that money? What use is human currency in the world of mole people? Do you have your own economy down there? Are you planning to disguise yourself as a human to buy things to take below ground? What was the point of all this? Or was it the case that the original point was actually to make you out as a legitimate threat to humanity at large, but you didn't want to open the sequel by setting the stakes through the roof, so you scaled him down significantly from what he was originally intended to be when you decided to make a sequel 14 years later? Nah. That couldn't be. They'd never retcon something and make it lamer to try to make it align better with their news story, regardless of the inconsistencies that it creates in the process. That would never happen. Pixar doesn't make bad movies. Well, I mean, except for Cars 2, of course. But that doesn't count. We don't talk about that one. So the Underminer breaks into the bank's vault and then equips Robin's tracksuit to suck up all the money while Bob sneaks up behind him and proceeds to have a little chat with him?
Underminer, we meet again!
Wait, what are you doing? Why are you wasting your time talking to the mole man when you could use this opportunity to sneak attack him when he's not looking at you? He would have had no idea you were there had you simply walked up behind him and bopped him on the head. But instead you took stupid pills and decided to launch into some heroic monologue resulting in you getting sucked into the money vault. Man, it'd be really awkward if the last movie made a deliberate point to mock the idea of people droning off into cliched monologues instead of just getting the job done without any theatrics involved, specifically to prevent situations like this from happening. Also, we meet again? What, you know this clown? When did that happen? You didn't feel like it might be worth mentioning to the other family members that you apparently know who this guy is? And if you fought the Underminer before, that must mean that he won against you, right? Because otherwise, how would he still be here robbing banks instead of locked up in a prison? In which case, literally, how could this stupid mole have ever outwitted you in combat? Surely all you'd have to do would be to punch him once to knock him out, right? Surely he's not somehow capable enough to best Mr. Goddamn Incredible in a fist-to-fist battle, right? No, actually, it turns out he really is capable of doing that. Bob is apparently so weak now that it not only takes him 6 punches to break through this door to get out of the money vault, when he was able to do this in the first movie, but he actually gets punched several times by the Underminer, and isn't able to overpower the Underminer when he grabs his fists. Do I need to remind you of how strong he was in the first movie? How he was able to knock the Omnidroid off its legs and back a significant distance away from him by simply punching it once? But this tiny little mole dude is giving you a run for your money? Is this a meme? Is this someone's idea of a joke? Who wrote this? Who looked at this idea and said, oh yeah, that'll be good. That makes perfect sense. Also, I forgot to mention that the Underminer summoned the power of Toy Story 4 and teleported to the other side of the tunneler. You were at the control panel when Bob delivered his 5th punch. He then punched the door for a 6th time, and apparently between punches 5 and 6, you found the opportunity to run all the way across the room to get behind the door so you could launch a surprise attack on him. Unless Bob wound up the slowest punch in history, there's no way you ever could have possibly gotten behind that door fast enough. Oh, but the painful action ain't over yet, folks! what? Because after Bob realizes that the writers nerfed him into oblivion in the most recent patch, he chucks him over his head and directly into the control panel, thus destroying it and preventing him from being able to stop the tunneler from surfacing again after the Underminer runs away in his escape drill. And I'm sorry, but Bob would never have been so stupid as to dispatch the villain by dismantling the only means you have of shutting this thing down. Nor should he have even had to resort to this option at all, because one punch should have been more than enough to knock this glorified Goomba out cold. Do you guys remember the opening of the original Incredibles, where in a remarkably short period of time, you learned precisely how competent Bob was at his job, how he was able to find creative ways to deal with multiple problems simultaneously, and was able to remain cool and collected under the most extreme pressure, and that he was an unfathomably strong individual, all of which was communicated to the audience by showing it to us instead of telling it to us, and all of which managed to get us to quickly like our protagonist and root for him? Yeah, well, not here. In the opening of this movie, the only thing I've learned about Mr. Incredible is that his name is a lie, and he's nothing but a weak, lumbering, idiotic buffoon who chooses the stupidest possible ways to accomplish his missions every time. Oh yeah, and the Underminer, he's done. He's gone. That's a wrap on him for Incredibles 2. The movie's only been going for 5 minutes, and that's including the opening credits and scenes where the Underminer wasn't even present, so he's actually been on screen for significantly less time. And just like that, the writers have thrown him away like a pile of sporks. Would false advertising be an accurate summation of this wildly disappointing turn of events? One of the biggest selling points for this movie was how it was going to be picking off right where the first film left off. We'd get to see the epic battle against the Underminer. We'd finally get that payoff after all those years of anticipation and imagining what this fight would have looked like. Yeah? Well, guess what? Nothing about this battle was even remotely epic in the slightest. It pit one of the Incredibles against him and had him fumble around like an idiot throughout the entire duration of the battle. A battle which lasted a grand total of less than 30 seconds from start to finish. And they don't even catch him in the end. He's just a loose end that never gets tied up throughout the course of the movie. It's almost as if you should have sent Helen in there with Bob so she could have tied him up while Bob beat the crap out of him. He shouldn't need a handicap to fight at all because he's Mr. Incredible. But he clearly does in this movie, and regardless, there's no reason not to send her in there with you anyway, because the alternative is for her to do absolutely nothing. What a waste of a fight scene. But oh no, the Underminer may have escaped, but the citizens are still in danger as now the tunneler is barreling towards City Hall and Bob has stupidly destroyed the controls, so now they can't manually shut it down. So the film finally remembers that the other Incredibles exist, and Dash and Violet run towards the chaos as the tunneler surfaces and Helen swings in to reunite with Bob. But they don't exactly get the chance to come up with a plan because suddenly a monorail comes swinging around the corner right as the drill collides with the tracks. But before it crashes to the streets below, Frozone skates in from who knows where to save the day. Lucky he arrived exactly when he did, or else everybody on board that monorail and likely several people on the streets below would have died horribly or at least been critically injured. Oh, by the way, this isn't going to be the last time that Frozone saves their asses hardcore and basically does the Incredibles job for them in this movie. And as far as the major action sequences are concerned, he plays an instrumental role in the resolution of those battles. And yet, at the same time, as soon as he saves the monorail, he proceeds to disappear from the film entirely, just like Helen did earlier, instead of, you know, trying to stop the drill. The movie just wants you to forget about him, despite also giving Frozone an MCU please clap style entrance and then not think about him until the absolute last possible second when he suddenly remembers there's a drill to stop. Awesome. Amazing. Just truly brilliant. Bob then jumps down to the streets below and uses his strength to steer the drill away from the buildings. Let me say that again. He uses his strength to steer the drill away from the buildings. The man who not 1 minute ago couldn't defeat the Underminer in hand-to-hand combat is able to successfully redirect a vehicle as massive as this entirely by himself. I mean, I'm glad the writers remembered how strong he's supposed to be, but you can't flip back and forth between strength levels so flippantly like this. Pick a lane and stick to it. Dash then speeds down the street and saves an elderly woman from being crushed by this flying debris, but before he can celebrate, a stroller appears to roll up to him all by itself, only for it to be revealed that Violet had been invisible and it was all a ploy to pawn off Jack babysitting duties so she could leap into battle herself. Meanwhile, Bob tries and fails to stop the drill with his own body by pressing himself up against the treads, and then when that doesn't work, he tries to stop it from behind by digging his feet into the road, while Helen swings onto the overpass to stop the traffic from crossing into the middle so the tunneler doesn't get them all killed, but one of the cars is caught on the crumbling road and so it tumbles to the street below and the driver inside dies. Oh wait, no she doesn't, because she just so happened to have opened the door as the car was tumbling off the overpass, and because Helen just so happened to fling herself to the correct side of the highway so she was close enough to be able to grab her in time. How she had the foresight and split-second reaction time to open up the doors if that would have been of any use to her whatsoever without the knowledge that Helen was close enough to be able to save her is beyond me, but whatever. Also, I don't even know that she should have had the strength to be able to catch her without falling off the lamppost lamppost anyway. They frame this as a perfectly seamless and casual action, but grabbing onto someone falling off as quickly as that should definitely at the very least destabilize you a little bit. But Helen just stretches out and then pulls her back without breaking a sweat? Damn, man, I didn't know super strength was also one of your powers. In fact, I was pretty sure the trade-off of your abilities was always that the further you stretched, the weaker your limbs became individually. But either way, if you are actually capable of stuff like this, then you really should have helped Bob out in that first battle. Now back to Violet, who has suddenly become drastically more assertive than she was at the end of the last movie, charging into the fight with the most confident smile lighting up her face you could ever imagine. She hadn't developed this much at the end of the last movie. She learned to be more sure of herself and to trust her abilities and instincts and was no longer shy around people, but her self-assurance had not been cranked up this much. I guess the thrill of the fight just suddenly gave her a major confidence boost? And a proficiency boost, apparently? What the hell was that move? Did you just throw two blades made out of force field energy cutting through the air at the perfect velocity and angle to destroy the rocks mid-air before they hit the citizens who were too stupid to just run out of the way? When did you learn how to pull that crap out of your ass? You had only very recently gotten a hold of creating basic force fields at the end of The Incredibles. Now all of a sudden you're throwing a whole new combat move into the mix, and one which you appear to have complete mastery over at that? It's not like years have passed. This picks up seconds after the first movie. Why, when, and how did you even think to try this? It's not like she had a look of apprehension on her face implying she was thinking, oh boy, I hope this works. She didn't even have a moment of hesitation and seemed to know with absolute confidence that she'd be able to perfectly execute this stunt. Apparently, just don't think about it. Then Bob grabs a fallen lamppost from who the hell knows where and uses it to try to stop the drill, and it works for about 3 seconds, but then it fails and we proceed to play a game of Pass the Jack-Jack as the Incredibles race to try to get ahead of the drill and Helen swings herself into the boiler room. I don't want it understated how insanely irresponsible it is to play hot potato with Jack-Jack right now in the middle of this fight. You were a much more effective team before this. Yes, you didn't used to have Jack-Jack with you as an added problem to take into consideration, but the Incredibles that I know wouldn't have just haphazardly passed him around the family like an obstacle to be dealt with. You demonstrated significantly better teamwork in the final battle against the Omnidroid from the second you landed back in the city to the moment you finally managed to tear it in half. But here you're fumbling over each other to make sure anybody other than yourself is in charge of watching over Jack-Jack because babysitting is lame. Who wants to be stuck with that job? What is this? What am I watching? How can you possibly expect me to believe that these events happen almost immediately after each other while proceeding to show me a family working on two radically different levels of coordination across the two films? Whatever. Helen gets ready to destroy the boiler and stop the drill while Bob and the kids climb up to lend her a hand, but as they do, they just so happen to pass by a mysterious man who's very excited to see that the superheroes are...
Public again.
Which... how wonderfully convenient is it that you're in this area exactly when you need to be in order to have a chat with Frozone so the rest of this movie can happen? And B, where the hell were you 3 months ago when the Incredibles saved the city from the Omnidroid? That was about as out in public as they possibly could have been, yet you've only just now decided that you want to do something about them? Is it because you didn't exist until yesterday when they wrote this movie? Is that it? Is that the reason why? It sure does seem that way, because if you had actually been around back then the central conflict of this movie would never have had a reason to get off the ground in the first place. Oh, by the way, Frozone's back! Yeah. Don't know what he's been doing for the last 5 minutes since there was nothing left for him to do after saving that monorail, and his ice abilities would be very helpful in trying to stop this thing. Maybe if you had come to help earlier, you'd have shut down the tunneler by now, but instead you're gonna end up making this the closest call in the history of close calls. Well, at least until the end of the movie dethrones it. Bob works together with Helen to overload the boiler and shut down the drill, while Violet uses her force field to protect the family from the explosion, and Frozone creates an ice wall big and strong enough to prevent the tunneler from barreling through City Hall and only causing minor damage as a result. For skating away as the cops show up, and thus the day is saved as the Incredibles celebrate. What an absolutely awful opening scene. Even putting aside all the plot beats that don't make any sense and character moments that make you want to die, you set the bar way too high in terms of stakes despite your efforts to mitigate them with a giant drill careening through the city, and now everything that happens after this point is going to end up feeling very anticlimactic and lame in comparison until the very end. That was something that the original did very well, an escalation of drama and tension. It started out very simple with a car chase and a cat in a tree, and slowly ramped up the stakes from that point onward before ultimately culminating in a large-scale, citywide battle against the Omnidroid. But here, we opened big in the beginning and now there's nowhere left for the stakes to go for the rest of the runtime. And as far as comparing things to the original goes, it's almost not even fair as to how drastically the first movie's opening scene blows this one completely out of the water. The Incredibles doesn't come out of the gate with an immediate action sequence. It starts slow and methodical with retro, flatly shot and mono-mixed 4x3 interviews for our three main superheroes, superheroes, and gives us a peek into their mindsets on the job, letting the audience know within seconds that this wasn't going to be just another superhero movie. It gave you a taste of all three characters' personalities so you have some concept of who these people are, as well as setting up major story beats and character conflicts to be developed later, such as the idea of settling down and starting a family, when Bob and Helen will ultimately end up dreaming the opposite of their current desires. And then it swells the music, engages a stereo surround sound, widens the aspect ratio, and brings out the dynamic, snappy camera angles to give you a glimpse of just how awesome those glory days were. It's only after giving you a taste of the characters' personalities that you get to see them engage in battle. We don't just immediately jump into the action. Action, by the way, that manages to be both fast-paced and intense as well as well thought out and coherent. It's not a slow, lumbering stroll through the city with a drill that moves at the speed of molasses and characters that all make the stupidest decisions possible. It manages to create more tension and drama with a simple car chase and a cat stuck in a tree than a drill threatening to destroy the entire city. How you screw that up is absolutely beyond me. And while all the action is happening, we are constantly learning information about the world building, the themes, and the characters. We get to see how the heroes bounce off each other and the chemistry they share. We get little snippets of how superheroes are viewed by the world at large, setting up the main thrust of the story, and are introduced to the thematic messaging that drives the movie forward, all without ever feeling like things are moving too slow or too fast. By the end of this opening sequence, you have a sufficient understanding of the basics of this world and its characters, and those things are all communicated efficiently, effectively, and subtly. But in Incredibles 2, we open with stupid, schlocky, sluggish action that only serves to significantly regress the characters in terms of their capabilities or personalities, or significantly advance them to an unbelievable degree on top of fundamentally reframing the ending of the first movie in a pathetic attempt to justify the existence of a second movie when there didn't even need to be one in the first place. All of which is topped off by a string of events that are either extremely contrived or just straight up make no sense at all when you apply the slightest amount of critical thought to the logic. And before I go any further, allow me to say this. To anybody out there who's been watching this video for 30 minutes and has been screaming at me the entire time saying, "Oh, come on, are you really criticizing the logic in a silly superhero movie made for kids? You can literally criticize any movie like this. Why are you getting hung up on such small nitpicky details, dude?" Then you're gonna want to listen up and listen good, because I'm a little sick and tired of hearing people decry every single criticism of a movie's logic as being just nitpicks when that is simply not the case. If you don't care about any of that and you just want to get back to the Incredibles 2 critique, then you can skip to this timestamp on screen here. But as for the rest of you, take out your handy dandy notebooks, because class is now in session on the topic of logical criticisms and nitpicking, especially in the context of kids' movies. First and foremost, a nitpick is a criticism that is small, but valid. So, thanks for conceding that my criticisms are valid. That was easier than I thought. Secondly, yes, you can look at almost any given movie that exists on this planet and you will most likely find at least one plot hole or inconsistency. Nobody is perfect, and I don't expect scripts to be either. In fact, you can even find examples of these things throughout the original 3 Toy Story movies. What's that? Gaming Magic 13 said the original 3 Toy Story movies aren't flawless masterpieces? But that can't be. He pretended they were perfect in his Toy Story 4 series. No, I didn't. I have never once in my life said that those movies are perfect, as no film on this planet is. In fact, I have perpetuated the exact opposite position as recently as my top 20 best movies video, where even upon placing Toy Story 3 as my #1 favorite movie of all time, I still explicitly stated that it wasn't flawless and showed a clip from the movie highlighting its biggest and most frustrating inconsistency. Gaming Magic 13 thinks the original trilogy is flawless is a lie perpetuated by people who don't want to actually address the criticisms that I made in that series and simply resort to saying, "Lamau, what a biased hypocrite. You criticize the logic of Toy Story 4 when there are logical issues also in the original movies, despite you praising them as masterpieces. Lol." So if you need me to be even more explicit, let me say this very slowly and very clearly for you all to hear. If you put Toy Story 1, 2, and 3 under the microscope of logical consistency, they will not emerge unscathed, but they will still emerge in extremely good condition. The first movie will be the most beaten up, but the other two will still have their fair share of scratches as well, because they are not perfect and they have their issues. They will simply emerge exponentially less damaged because they possess far more positive qualities than negative ones. When you put every movie under this analytical lens, you will not always come out with the cavalcade of stupidity that is Toy Story 4's plot. Some movies, like that one, are chock full of inconsistencies and don't have even a single thing that makes the slightest bit of sense unless it's running off contrivance. But some movies are so impressively airtight that it's damn near impossible to poke even the slightest of holes in them. Or they have so few that they are dwarfed by the amount of plot points and character threads that do run consistently. So So yes, you can break down any movie on this planet in the same way that I did for Toy Story 4, but you will get a different number of errors for every film you do that for. Not all films are equivalent in terms of illogical writing. Third, and most importantly, the simple fact that I am breaking down the events in a movie's plot does not mean I'm nitpicking it. Something a lot of people who only made it as far as my first Toy Story 4 video believed was that I spent way too long dissecting the opening scene and that it was all such small, nitpicky criticisms. You know, criticizing things like the inconsistencies with Bo Peep's dress and the driveway. Now, I'm not gonna retread old ground in this video and explain why those things make no sense. You already have that video to go watch if you want to hear that. What I want to focus on is the fact that these things are very much not insignificant details as a point of reference for the wider conversation here. The only reason why Bo Peep is able to be the action-oriented hero that she is in Toy Story 4 is because they completely overhauled the physics of how her dress behaves so that it could be detached and turned into a cape. Yes, in isolation, simply saying her dress is different sounds like a very stupid, nitpicky detail to bring up that has no impact on anything. And had it simply been the case that her dress changed from pink and white to blue and black or something, that would be weird and confusing, but also totally meaningless in the grand scheme of things. But that is in an entirely different context to what actually happens in Toy Story 4. In that movie, the reason why her dress changing is so important is because if Bo Peep still has her stiff, rigid wireframe dress from the first two movies, then she wouldn't be able to be a parkour expert in all of her subsequent action scenes. Hence, a seemingly small detail has major implications for the rest of the movie. Same thing with the driveway. If this driveway doesn't exist, which it clearly doesn't thanks to the other movies, and even Kingdom Hearts 3 as has been recently brought to my attention, then this entire opening scene cannot happen because Andy would never have been able to play with RC out there in the first place, and if they don't have a toy to rescue them, Woody would not have been in a position to see Bo Peep get taken away and then try to stop her from leaving in the box scene. And as a gentle reminder, this box scene is the catalyst for his emotional journey throughout the film. This emotional goodbye he has with Bo heavily informs the final choice he makes to leave Bonnie and all his friends. And it only happens because Operation Pole Toy goes off without a hitch, when it absolutely should not have because this driveway's existence is a blatant contradiction. Hence, a seemingly small detail has major implications for the rest of the movie. Do you see what I'm getting at here? If you remove any and all context from a given situation, then saying something as simple as her dress is different can seem like a meaningless nitpick. But when you actually bother to take into consideration the significance such a change has for the rest of the story, you quickly realize that the things I bring up in my videos are all for a very important reason. You see, a movie is like an enormous clock. It only works if all the little cogs mesh together. A clock must be clean, well lubricated, and wound tight. All these little details that may seem insignificant in isolation carry with them very significant consequences for how the rest of the story plays out. You want to know what an example of an actual nitpick looks like? You guys remember this shot from Toy Story 4? The funny haha moment where the lady screams after seeing the Chucky doll? Well, here's something you may never have noticed about it. If you look at the booth in the background, you will see that the attendant inside appears to have gone brain dead. They just aren't moving at all. They don't even blink, they just stand there menacingly, like a statue frozen in time. This is quite the oversight, and it's very, very creepy to look at, but if the person in charge of this shot hadn't forgotten to animate her, literally nothing about the movie would change. Hence, it was one of many actual nitpicks that were left out of my script. But things like this absolutely do not fall under that category. Things like the material of a dress changing, thus allowing every action scene a character partakes in to happen, or an impossible chain of monkeys being constructed, thus allowing the characters to survive, and allowing the crux of the movie's emotional core to happen are absolutely not nitpicks. You don't have to care about any of these things. Not even a little bit. They don't have to affect your personal enjoyment of a movie whatsoever. Everyone is going to value different things when they watch a film. Some people will have their immersion shattered when a story doesn't follow any kind of logic, but some people won't care about that in favor of characters or themes or world building or any number of things. You can feel however you want about any of the criticisms that I bring up, but just because you don't personally care about criticisms of a movie's logic doesn't immediately make them all nitpicks. Now, having said that, it's important to note that nitpicks are still valid criticism. There are certainly things I've brought up in the past that are so small and insignificant that if you change them, the movie would not suddenly become a masterpiece. Things like Andy looking different in Toy Story 4, or the calendar and Free Guy not having a fourth day of the month come to mind in that department. Hell, in this very video, I brought up earlier how Tony doesn't look anything like how he used to in the first Incredibles movie. Want to hear another nitpick from this opening scene that I glossed over? The Incredibles are able to transport Jack around in a stroller despite clearly not having one in in their possession at the end of the first movie. These points have no impact on anything because if you were to change them to be consistent, it would not affect how the story unfolds in any meaningful way. Yet, they are still valid criticisms to point out because they are clear and undeniable inconsistencies between the two movies, and rather obvious ones at that. A small scratch on your laptop screen will not impact its performance as a laptop, yet I imagine you would still probably want to avoid it sustaining even the most minor of damages, no? I've never said Toy Story 4 is a bad movie specifically and entirely because of an impossible chain of monkeys or retcon driveway or any other individual miscellaneous logical inconsistencies or contrivances plaguing the entirety of that script. The longest sections in my Toy Story 4 videos are the parts where I go into great detail about the thorough character assassination and morally reprehensible themes the movie is communicating because those are the things that piss me off the most. But they're also not the only things I'm going to talk about because there was a lot more to how broken the movie is than just those elements. At the same time, discerning the difference between the importance of a small logic error that I spend a maximum of 1 minute talking about compared to a complete and utter assassination of one's character that I spent upwards of almost 20 minutes breaking down shouldn't be particularly challenging to do. So to simply take one single minor minute-long point that I make in that series and parrot it around as if it's the entirety of my argument is not only wildly disingenuous and inaccurate, but also hilariously ironic considering that these people will accuse me of nitpicking a movie to death while simultaneously nitpicking me by taking one small argument that I make and pretending as if that's all I have to say with absolutely zero self-awareness whatsoever. Also, to everybody asking things like, why do you care so much about a stupid kids movie that you spend 5 hours talking about them on YouTube? I have a few responses to your inquiry. First of all, specifically in regards to Incredibles 2, director Brad Bird has actually said previously that this is not a kids movie. So, you might want to take it up with him the next time you want to reduce one of his films as being merely a silly kids movie. Because I somehow doubt he thinks so little of his own creation, nor do I think he would believe his movie to be above criticism even if he had tailored it towards children. Speaking of which, secondly, movies targeted towards children are no less susceptible to poor writing than movies targeted towards adults. I judge everything by the same standard. It's as simple as that. I don't give movies like Toy Story 4 a pass because Pixar has shown time and time again that they are more than capable of creating logically airtight, emotionally moving, and meaningful stories that, while not immune to contrivances or plot holes, still have far more positive attributes than negative ones, to the point where the proportion is almost overwhelming. It is entirely possible for movies aimed at kids to go above and beyond in terms of character and plot writing, and I somehow doubt that if I were to create an incredibly detailed analysis breaking down how amazingly well-written The Incredibles is for 5 hours, that you'd be saying, dude, why do you care so much about a stupid kids movie? It is of no benefit to my personal well-being to make my videos as long as they are. It would be much easier for me to crap out 10-minute videos on a regular basis in which I say absolutely nothing for the sake of making easy money. Unfortunately for my health, I have a lot to say on the subjects that I cover, which is what results in my scripts becoming as long as they are. I don't just throw in random garbage for the sake of drawing out the runtime. I suppose you could technically say that about this little tangent that I've been going on about the topic of logical criticism and nitpicking in kids movies, since it's not explicitly about Incredibles 2, but considering that it's just a kids movie or you're just nitpicking are the #1 defenses that I've seen for Pixar movies recently, I think it's more than relevant to lay down some ground rules for how this stuff works in case anyone wants to try to use those same defenses this time around. More to the point, longer videos mean more extensive and meticulous video editing, which, believe it or not, ain't exactly the most thrilling thing in the world, but I do it because I'm not interested in damaging the integrity of my arguments by artificially chopping out segments just for the sake of creating a shorter, less comprehensive analysis, especially since I do not have the power to hold you hostage and force you to watch my videos in one sitting, nor would I want to. You are free to split them up into multiple viewing sessions as you so choose. You may consume my content however you best see fit. I didn't even think I would ever need to say something so obvious like that, but something that I've discovered over the last few months is that there's a disturbing amount of people whose only view of media analysis begins and ends at long video equals bad video, assuming that for someone to talk for this amount of time about a movie, I must repeat myself constantly and pad out the runtime with random nonsense without even bothering to actually watch the content itself before making a judgment call on it, at which point they would realize that statement isn't even remotely accurate. Finally, I would rather talk for too much time and make my arguments crystal clear than I would spend too little time on a subject and have people accuse me of not explaining myself enough. I'd rather be accused of talking for too long than not going in depth enough. Lengthy, in-depth analysis videos are what you can expect to see far more of on my channel moving forward on a hopefully slightly more regular basis than what I've been providing recently. And I am sorry about that, of course, but it does take quite a bit of time to make these things. That type of content isn't something that's going to appeal to everybody, which is fine. I can't force you to watch my videos, and I can't force everybody on the planet to like them. But for those of you that are interested in these types of videos and the topics that I cover, let me reassure you that I have no plans of stopping anytime soon. And on that note, let's finally get back to Incredibles 2, shall we? So the Underminer's attempts to destroy City Hall has been foiled, and the Incredibles emerge victorious as Frozone is tracked down by the mysterious man chauffeur and tempted with the possibility of superheroes being made legal again. But then, a twist! The Incredibles are now being arrested for causing further damage to the city? What?
What are you talking about?
They're being held responsible for the damage caused? That makes no sense at all. The Incredibles didn't launch the drill at City Hall. They fought to stop it with every ounce of strength they had and saved countless people who were caught in its line of fire. The situation was very clearly not their fault, and as a matter of fact, they did everything within their power to help try to stop it. They may have chosen very flawed ways to attempt to stop it, but at no point did they directly cause any more damage to the city. Hey, question, why are the Incredibles only being arrested now after this event when literally nobody cared about what they did 3 months ago? They arguably dealt more damage to the city in that battle than they did in this one, under your logic, because they consciously chose to use the remote to launch the Omnidroid into the nearby building as well as cause it to explode in a fiery inferno, but nobody cared then. Do you want to know why? Because they saved the city from being decimated by this massive threat, and they did it again here by stopping the drill from leveling City Hall and killing the people in its path. So please, do tell me why magically now their heroic actions are suddenly a problem, especially when Dicker said,
"People of this country are indebted to you."
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it because you never intended to make a sequel that continued the idea that superhero actions are illegal and tried to retcon the original ending as soon as you did decide to make one? Right, I forgot. Continuity isn't a thing anymore, which is what leads to having idiotic conversations like this.
We didn't start this fight.
Well, you didn't finish it either.
What are you... Not finishing the fight doesn't suddenly make them responsible for starting it. That doesn't make any sense at all. That's not how liability works. Also, the cops didn't do diddly squat throughout the entire battle and only showed up after the Incredibles had already saved everybody's lives. So I don't want to hear a peep out of you about finishing fights. Only one person is allowed to make remarks like that, and it certainly ain't you. Or you.
Finish the mission, no matter the cost.
No! So how does the rest of this stupid interrogation play out?
Did you stop the Underminer from inflicting more damage?
Yes. Wait, what? What do you mean? Of course you stopped him from inflicting more damage. Yes, you absolutely did that. You saved the lives of several civilians both directly and indirectly, and you saved several buildings from being flattened, including City Hall, which I imagine had more than a few important people inside it, no? You absolutely stopped the Underminer from inflicting more damage. I don't know what the hell you're talking about right now. Maybe your memory's starting to go now that you're getting older. It had been 3 whole seconds since the last movie after all, and you can't remember what happened earlier today, but you are telling a lie to these people right now in order to convince the audience that the Incredibles did the wrong thing by jumping in to help when that simply isn't the case.
Did you stop him from robbing the banks?
No, because they were incompetent, but that doesn't make them responsible for the robbery in the first place.
Banks were insured. If you had simply done nothing, everything would now be proceeding in an orderly fashion.
You'd have preferred we do nothing?
Without a doubt.
Stop. Just stop talking. Every word you speak is another 50 brain cells I've lost. The banks being insured doesn't change anything about the lives that they saved. Also, that shouldn't even matter anyway. The fact that the banks are insured doesn't mean you should just let them rob the bank. You mean to tell me that had it just been a normal bank robbery, and the police caught wind of this, and they would have just went, oh well, what can you do, I suppose? Just another day in Museburg. The banks are insured, they'll be fine. Anyone want another donut? No way that's actually what you think would have or should have happened here. Who wrote this dialogue? None of this makes any sense at all. This entire scene is just infuriating to watch because it is so clear-cut that the Incredibles are objectively not at fault for anything that they've done in this movie thus far, yet the writers are working overtime to try to convince you otherwise. And you may say, well, that's the point. It's supposed to be an unfair system that they're being punished for doing the right thing. That's a great counter-argument. There's just one problem with it. The movie doesn't agree with you. Bob and Helen don't put up any resistance to the idea that they did anything to save people or in any way mitigate the damage that was dealt today. Bob actually explicitly agrees with every accusation slung against him when he should know full well that were it not for the actions of him and his family, things would be a lot worse right now for both the city and its people. And this clown's defense of, oh dude, the banks are insured, means nothing at all. On top of that, it becomes a major plot beat later that the superheroes need to reduce the amount of collateral damage they cause when going out on their missions. The writers and the characters seem to all be in agreement that the Incredibles are at fault for this when that's just not the case. You may also say, well, hang on a minute. The public railed against superheroes in the first movie too. That was literally the event to kickstart the rest of the movie. Yes, that did happen. But the difference between that fantastically written opening and this idiotic sludge is that the superheroes were directly responsible for people's injuries in the beginning of that movie. Yes, Bob saved the lives of the people on the train, but in doing so caused severe injuries in the process. And legally speaking, they had the grounds to sue because it was, by all technicality, his fault that they were hurt. Yes, Bob saved the life of the man trying to kill himself, but in doing so caused him to sustain critical injuries. But those examples do not apply as precedent here because the Incredibles didn't directly cause death or injury to anybody at any point, and in fact, did the opposite in nearly every step of the way. And it can't be a case of them just wanting the superheroes to stay out of the way and let the police or military do all the work because they were literally not there. The only people who were in any way present for this attack were the Incredibles and Frozone. And had they chosen to do nothing like you explicitly said you wanted them to, everybody on that monorail, everybody in City Hall, everybody on that highway, and everybody on the streets would have either died horribly or been hospitalized for a very long time. There is no way for the audience to understand the thought process and motivation of the police and government here because there is no logical train of thought running through their actions when there absolutely was one in the first movie. You could perfectly understand the reasoning why the superheroes had to go into hiding while still rooting for them to one day get the chance to shine again because in spite of the collateral damage they may have caused, the world was undoubtedly worse off without them. But all of that nuance has been surgically removed from Incredibles 2 in favor of cartoonishly stupid antagonistic forces that only exist to arbitrarily create conflict which had already been resolved in the first movie, as was heavily implied by several significant scenes at the end, including this one with Rick Dicker. Speaking of whom, turns out Dicker was just in the room the whole time, just sitting in the corner, twiddling his thumbs, not even trying to help defuse the situation at all, much to the Incredibles' annoyance, to which his response is,
"You want out of the hole? First you gotta put down the shovel."
Hey, remember when you said this at the end of the last movie?
People of this country are indebted to you.
Remember how satisfying it was to see Dicker reward and praise the Incredibles for their hard work after seeing how fed up with their constant antics he was earlier? Yeah, well now they just reset his character back to the position of being annoyed he has to help them at all because we gotta get that conflict in there. That's a pattern that, if you haven't noticed it already, you're gonna start to see it real soon. They have fully reset so many things that the first film worked so hard to accomplish because it wants to retread old ground that had already been resolved instead of taking the characters and story in a new direction, having been freed of the burden of being illegal superheroes. They started doing it with the first line of dialogue to come out of Helen's mouth, and it's only going to get more and more egregious the further into the story we get. Moving on, the family is allowed to go back to their home, that being Safari Corps Motel, seeing as their house kinda, exploded. And during the ride, Violet tells her dad about the incident with Tony that happened earlier. So Bob decides to alert Dicker about this little Tony problem, to which she says that he'll check it out. See, it's all connected! But before he leaves, he calls Bob and Helen over to have a word with them. Apparently, this super relocation program is being shut down because
Politicians don't understand people who do good simply because it's right. Makes them nervous.
So, there's an idea the movie wants to communicate here. The idea that the motivation of politicians lies not in doing what's right for the people, but in something else entirely. What that something else is goes unspecified by the movie, but it could be anything. Money, notoriety, you name it. And on a conceptual level, you can do something with this. There are stories you can tell that tackle the motivations of politicians and the ripple effect that it has on society as a whole in a nuanced manner. The thing is, the writers weren't actually interested in telling that story. They just wanted to drop that line in there to try to sound meaningful and provide a meta-commentary on the state of politics, but it's entirely meaningless because the messaging goes no deeper than this line and this line alone, and when you think about it in relation to the rest of the story, it only falls even further apart. Politicians don't have to understand the reasons why superheroes do what they do. All they have to do is look at the verifiable evidence of the unfalsifiable good that they've done for the city over the years, and, perhaps more pertinent, the damage they've prevented and therefore money saved in necessary repairs. Ah, but don't you see? The heroes caused a lot of damage today, so that's why the superheroes are being shut down. Well, clearly that isn't the case because that's not the motivation Dicker just provided us with, and even if it was, it still wouldn't work because we already established earlier that the Incredibles very much did not cause a lot of damage today, and if that were really what the government was concerned with, then they should have had major objections to this entire situation from 3 months ago, and as a result, this exchange in the car should not have happened. And yet,
They've been gunning for supers for years. Today was all they needed.
Yeah, today was all they needed to shut the program down, but apparently the battle 3 months ago with significantly greater damage caused had no impact on anything. So ultimately, all we're left with is a line of dialogue that gives you a taste of what could be an insightful meta-commentary on a conceptual level, but one that goes no deeper than that concept and is at odds with the wider context of the story. You're gonna see that happen a lot more as we move throughout this movie. Dicker says his goodbye to the Parr family and informs them that the best he can offer is 2 more weeks in the motel before the financial relocation assistance expires, and now it's it's time for the family to sit around the table and have a nice dinner while attempting to have an intelligent, comprehensive, and meaningful conversation about the current state of affairs.
There's deja vu.
Violet tells Dash to wash his hands, and he does before discovering that sadly the menu for tonight contains only vegetables. And then the big conversation gets underway with Violet asking if they're going to talk about the elephant in the room, to which Bob's response is,
What elephant?
I guess not then.
"Really, Bob? You really need her to spell out for you what she's talking about?" Oh right, he already forgot what happened earlier today. Maybe I should cut him some slack. Tell you who I won't be cutting any slack though. Helen, because her commentary on the events that unfolded today is that
We all made mistakes.
implying that she believes their choice to help save people today was a mistake, which I don't believe for a second is something she would ever say. Helen from the beginning of The Incredibles? Maybe. But Helen at this point in the story? No, she never would have said this. No way she unironically believes that choosing to help people was by any means a mistake. And you definitely didn't think this was a mistake 5 minutes ago in this movie when you were victoriously smiling and laughing along with the rest of your family after successfully stopping the tunneler from destroying City Hall. But that's not even the worst part about this conversation. Violet expresses annoyance with her and Dash being stuck with babysitting duties while her parents did the important stuff, to which Helen says,
You're not old enough to decide about these things.
I wanted to slap her with a newspaper the second I heard her say this in the theaters. Hey, balloon brain, let me explain something to you. If Violet and Dash hadn't decided to race into the city to help you guys and had simply been content with babysitting instead, then many people would have died. And don't even get me started on how thoroughly the original Incredibles movie nukes Helen's entire argument here. The second half of that film literally does not happen without Dash and Violet. Without Dash, Helen drowns at sea with no means of getting herself to dry land. If Bob and Helen had been caught by Syndrome while trying to escape the island, which seems more than likely given his ability to fly and his vast surveillance systems, they would not have been able to escape without Violet. Once the final battle gets underway, it's only thanks to Dash playing keep away with the remote and Violet turning invisible to stealthily bring it to Helen that they're able to destroy the Omnidroid once and for all. And of course, they're all very dead if Violet doesn't save their asses hardcore with the final force field. And as a gentle reminder, those two were on their own with no parents around for a pretty significant chunk of the first movie. So even if you wanted to chalk up their other accomplishments to them just being told what to do by their parents, which isn't even true anyway, but even if we assume it was, that doesn't apply to this section of the movie because their parents aren't around to help them. Dash is able to outwit these flying saucers all by himself, and Violet and Dash are able to work together to be able to steamroll through all these guards without any assistance from Bob or Helen whatsoever. And hell, even if you just look at this movie, both Dash and Violet are demonstrated as being remarkably competent with how quickly they're able to assess the threats and react fast enough to stop them. You could even say that they're both a little too good at doing that. In fact, I did say that earlier, but it is still crystal clear across both Incredibles movies that these kids are more than capable of making their own decisions and helping you save the day, but Helen has conveniently forgotten all of that for the sake of, once again, resetting the movie back to status quo. You'd think that even a single one of these instances would work as a counter-argument they can present to her during this conversation, but they don't. Instead, Violet tries to confuse Bob with very small words to get him to say what she wants him to say, but because Bob is an intellectually vacant quack in this movie, he doesn't either commit to the right side or commit to Helen's brain-dead argument. Instead, he struggles to form a basic single sentence when that was not at all how he was in the first film. Once Violet realizes that the hamster in Bob's brain is running a little bit slower than usual today, she redirects her attention to Helen and finally puts up a good rebuttal to her mother's completely unjustifiable resistance to the idea of her kids helping them fight crime.
You said things were different now.
And what is her response?
And they were. On the island.
That is such unmitigated crap. That is not what you meant when you first wrote that line, and you damn well know it. That's why you gave that film the ending that you did. Because after an entire movie's worth of development for these characters, and more specifically, the kids proving that they were more than capable of standing on their own 2 feet to help battle the same level of villains as their parents, they could finally step into the spotlight right alongside them to become the heroes they were always born to be. Also, don't try to cut out the most damning part of that conversation. Do you guys remember what else she said to Violet?
You have more power than you realize. And don't worry, if the time comes, you'll know what to do. It's in your blood.
Does that sound like something you say when you're unwilling to let your children help you fight crime? No, it doesn't. It sounds like something you say when, even though you may not have been previously allowed to express it given the circumstances of the world you live in, you still have an undying faith in the capabilities of your kids and can entrust them with tasks as demanding as this. I hate this garbage. I hate it when writers retroactively try to reframe previous movies to justify a continuation of the story, especially when it creates blatant inconsistencies with both entries in the series as a result. Next up in our lovely dinner scene, Helen grows tired of the the kids saying they want to help fight crime and demands that everybody just eats their dinner while it's still hot and just comes off as completely insufferable. Did you guys know that you can have a character be stern and commanding without being a complete prick in the process? Oh yeah, you do know that, because that's how Helen acted the first time around. She had no problem sternly disciplining her children should the situation necessitate it, but you also entirely understood her reasons for doing so and wound up getting mad at nobody in the room because of it. Violet's outburst about wanting to live a normal life and Dash's desire to channel his mountain of energy into something he's passionate about but not being allowed to do so are both extremely relatable things that anybody can look at and understand their frustration, while simultaneously understanding a parent's desire to stop things from spiraling out of control. But that's not what's happening here. This dinner conversation is extremely calm-mannered and not in danger of flying off the rails like the first movie. The only reason she wants to silence this debate is because she's horrifically and embarrassingly wrong about the capabilities of her children, and if they were allowed to talk about it for just 1 minute longer, she'd realize that. But if she realizes that, then the kid's arc in this movie no longer has any relevance, so of course we can't have that. Oh, but then it gets worse! Because Bob actually firmly pushes back against this absurd idea when Dash asks if they did something wrong, and she says yes, but Bob says no, and so she does a meme face, and then the parents start to argue, leading to Helen defending that superheroes are illegal, therefore what they did was wrong, which is hysterical to listen to. You are in no position to grandstand Bob over this decision as if you have some moral high ground over him when you had your mask on before he did. Helen didn't even think twice about engaging superhero mode. You can try your best to retcon it all you want, but it's not enough to make me forget about that ending. You can't change the past no matter how hard you try. Then the movie thinks it becomes super smart by having Bob ask what they're teaching their kids, to which Helen says that they're teaching them to respect the law, something Bob takes issue with because as he sees it, the law is disrespectful, to which we get this verbal diarrhea.
If laws are unjust, there are laws to change them.
Well, the laws are unjust in your universe, and apparently, thanks to this movie, we know that they haven't been changed. Saying this line is of no use to the current conversation whatsoever, because we aren't talking about whether the law should be changed or not. We're talking about the morality of choosing to act as a superhero, which is a topic of discussion that as of a few hours ago, you were clearly in the position that you should help no matter what. Yet now you've done a complete 180 and basically walked back all your character development. By the logic you presented in this scene, you believe that your kid shouldn't have saved those people from being crushed by the rocks earlier, nor should they have used their powers to save you, because let's be perfectly clear here, if Violet actually did what you told her to do and stayed back to watch Jack Jack, you two both would have exploded in a fiery inferno and your kids would have been parentless in an instant, including your newborn baby. It's almost laughable how much of a leg you do not have to stand on right now. Yet the movie wants you to think she had something quite substantive to say because she had a line that was slightly more elaborate than the rest of the movie's dialogue. Just like with Dicker Outside on the topic of politicians, the writers bring up the topic of legality versus morality and then proceed to do absolutely nothing with it. Her only recourse after Bob responds by saying that chaos is what they already have is to do this. And childishly slamming the table like Phoenix fucking Wright doesn't make your point any more valid, it just makes you look like a whiny asshole upset they're losing an argument. Helen says their time of fighting crime as a family is over and they need to adapt, and that's a wrap on the dinner scene for Incredibles 2. Another pathetic attempt at recapturing the magic of the first movie has completely and totally failed in every way. I'm sorry, but the original dinner scene was just so much more subtle and engaging than this. It took a standard family dinner fight and upscaled it in accordance with everybody's superpowers, not only to continue to enforce everybody's individual capabilities, but also to provide a visually intriguing sequence of events, which seamlessly meshes together with the ongoing character conflicts with the kids and their desires to live the lives that they want to when their superpowers are getting in the way, and Bob's nostalgic yearning for the glory days, leaving him impressed by Dash's use of powers at school, while simultaneously being at odds with Helen as her desire is to stop the chaos before it gets out of control. It was conceptually simplistic in terms of what was actually happening in the story, and wasn't too dissimilar from your average family dinner fight, but the way it conflates those mundane elements with the burdens and benefits of a superhero's life, reinforcing what every single family member's superpowers are, adds a wonderful new flavor to the scene that makes it endlessly entertaining to watch and continues to progress the story and characters forward without being overt about it. None of that is present in this scene. It's just people chatting at a table, and the energy that fueled every frame of the first movie's conversation is noticeably absent here, as the most dramatic thing that happens is this. I haven't learned anything here about the plot or the characters except that Helen is a petulant child who's more immature than her own kids, whom she avidly claims aren't old enough to make decisions for themselves, and that the first movie was entirely pointless, because all that work it did to bring the family together as a superhero team doesn't mean anything anymore. Now we're moving on to the motel pool, where Bob and Helen are talking about what they're gonna do now that the program is shut down. They realize that one of them has to get a job, and Helen kindly and calmly offers to take her turn in the private sector after Bob spent all those years working at insurer care, which seems completely tonally at odds with the last scene, especially considering that less than a minute ago we saw her doing this. But whatever, that's not the worst part here, because Bob's response to her offer is to say,
I need to do this.
oh, sorry, wrong audio clip. Yep, getting some major Toy Story 4 vibes here, as once again we have the closest person in our main character's life offer to take on the hard work to give him a break, to which he stubbornly refuses because
I need to do this.
which, just like in that movie, doesn't make any sense at all here, because a major part of Bob's arc in the last movie was him realizing that he hadn't been there for the kids like he should have been, resenting himself for being so caught up in chasing the high of the glory days that he missed so much of the most important thing in his life, his family. If anything, you'd think he'd jump at the chance to not only get away from the hell that Incuracare and other places like that put him through, as he himself admits to be true,
Hated every minute of it.
but to also be able to use that time to spend it with his family to start making up for the time that he lost. But nope! Instead, he's adamantly claiming that he needs to be the one to step up and find a job, as if everything he said in the last movie meant absolutely nothing at all. Kill me. Oh, and another thing. When Bob asks where his suits and ties are, Helen reminds him that they were burnt up in the house explosion, which begs the question, did you not have homeowners insurance to not only cover the cost of repairing the damage done to the home itself as well as the assets inside, but to also provide you housing in the meantime? It would be very strange for you, of all people, to not be insured considering where you worked for all those years, as you just established not 5 seconds ago. Oh, whatever. Lucius shows up in a big dramatic entrance, and after learning the Incredibles are only allowed to stay in this motel for another 2 weeks, he offers to let their family, which consists of 3 kids, one of whom is still a baby, to stay with him and his wife in their apartment. Honestly, I felt relieved when he showed up on screen and saw him being so generous to the Incredibles. He's basically like family to them at this point, and I'm very glad to see that his character wasn't in any way damaged for this movie. Or at least his values and beliefs weren't damaged for this movie. His proficiency in competence while in Frozone mode is a bit of a different story, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Let's just enjoy this brief for free while we can, shall we? So it turns out he's not just here to offer some support in the time of need, but also to provide the audience with a follow-up to that cryptic conversation he had earlier. He apparently got an offer from someone named Winston Deavor, who trained under Rick Dicker, to talk to the 3 of them together as a group about hero stuff, which you'd think would immediately set off some alarm bells in Bob's head, considering the fact that the last time he trusted a super rich business person who was vaguely affiliated with a government agency due to being tempted by the possibility of returning to the spotlight, it blew up in his face so badly it nearly got everybody in his family killed and nearly got the whole city destroyed. One would assume that he, or Helen, would be slightly concerned by the possibility that this could be a trap, or that at the very least they would call out the similarity to what happened last time we did this song and dance, but nope, don't you see?
I checked him out. He's legit. Trained under Dicker.
Oh, okay then. He was trained by Dicker, so we're all good. Off we go then. I question the idea that the CEO of a company as influential as we're about to be told about would have somehow had time to also train as a part of the relocation program, especially because this is something that goes entirely unmentioned when they meet, when you'd imagine that he would want to tell the heroes all about how he helped out in the program and trained under Dicker to help earn their trust rather than keeping that private. But it's fine, it's totally cool. Dicker trained him, apparently, so I'm sure it's all good and there's absolutely no possibility for betrayal whatsoever. And so they all agree to leave now to meet this Winston Deavor person, but Lucius makes a special note that they should wear their classic super suits, not their new Incredibles super suits, because
Got a feeling he's nostalgic.
which, in concept, is a great in-universe reason to have an excuse to show off both Bob and Helen in their classic suits. But then you think about it for 2 seconds, and suddenly a very obvious question comes to mind. How exactly do you still have your old super suits? You just got done establishing that all Bob's old suits and ties were destroyed in the explosion. Yet I'm supposed to believe that these things magically survived? Seriously? These aren't the new suits that, according to Edna, are
Virtually indestructible.
And if you want to say, well, maybe the old suits were also designed to be virtually indestructible, I got some bad news for you on that front. Bob, Helen, and Lucius head off to Devtech headquarters and holy moly, that thing is huge! This skyscraper is so tall, it literally extends above the clouds. Now, admittedly, that may not exactly be an uncommon attribute for skyscrapers to have, as we see momentarily, but they don't all look like something out of New Alexandria. If Devtech is such a mammoth of a building with such a distinct architectural layout and color scheme in its lighting, and we find out later that it's directly next to the only shoreline in the entire city, meaning that there's only one direction the Incredibles could have flown in from in this scene, then how exactly did we not see this in the last movie when they did fly in? It wouldn't happen to be because you made him up in between movies and hope nobody would notice such a glaring change in geography, would it? Oops, sorry about that, wrong clip. That would never be the case, right? Nah, of course not. I certainly hope we don't get any backstory in a few minutes that would only further solidify how well you and your company don't slot in with the established continuity of this universe. Speaking of established continuity, where did the tear on Bob's suit go? You know how that tear was a pretty significant plot point in the first film and you could still see the stitching even after Edna patched it up? Yeah, well, I guess I just kind of forgot about that when they were remodeling everything for this movie, which you might think would be an understandable mistake, and technically, you're right. It is a very minor detail to get hung up on. But considering the fact that Pixar has previously demonstrated no issues with maintaining continuity, specifically in regards to stitching things back together, I think it's fair to hold them to their own standard on this note, don't you? Anyway, our heroes step through the doors of Devtech and then they...
Welcome to my tower, Master Chief.
I'm kidding, of course, but this is on par with that in terms of pre-planned introductions. I like the idea that much like Chakalock, he spent like an hour planning the most dramatic way to introduce himself. I find it kind of charming, honestly. Helps build character. Winston Deavor descends down the stairs, nerding out over how happy he is to be able to meet these superheroes, and then to prove it, he proceeds to sing both Mr. Incredible and Frozone's theme songs as his sister comes bursting through the doors late to the meeting. And her name is... Evelyn, making her full name Evelyn Deavor. Evelyn Deavor. Evil Endeavor. Evil Endeavor. Her name's...
I want a short cameo.
Oh, you're gonna get one, because I'm gonna ask you in a second here about, Evelyn Deavor. That name ring a bell?
No. I don't know what you're talking about.
No familiar memory associated with such an Ace Attorney level name pun? You didn't openly admit to me all those years ago that you did not see the connection of Evelyn Deavor?
I don't know what you're talking about. That's weird. You'd have to be some sort of dumbass to not get that.
Alright.
I don't know.
Her name is literally Evil Endeavor. It's like they just ripped her straight out of an Ace Attorney game and plopped her into this movie. The audience is already going to be extremely on edge going into this scene given how badly the charade went last time. Making her name literally be Evil Endeavor is just a cherry on top to immediately make most people realize that she's obviously going to be the villain. Like, you're not even trying to hide it. So I certainly hope you guys are going to pretend later this is some big, jaw-droppingly shocking surprise, because that would be really awkward. But what's even more awkward than that is the monologue that Winston has in this scene. Winston delivers his emotionally scarring backstory, talking about how his father was the bestest supporter of superheroes who ever existed, constantly raising money for their causes, as well as a statue of Dynaguy in Avery Park. His father believed so strongly in superheroes and was so passionate about their line of work that he befriended Gazerbeam and Vironic and had phones installed into his home that gave him direct access to them should he ever need their help. Which begs the question, if this guy was so influential in the world of superheroes, then how would the Incredibles not already know about him? Bob seemed to have at least some familiarity with Gazerbeam based on how he talked about him in the last movie. And even if he didn't, shouldn't he still know about a superhero advocate as significant as him? Where the hell were these people in the first film? I mean, obviously the dad would have been dead for the main story. Oh yeah, he's gonna die, by the way, due to very stupid reasons, but we'll get there. Patience. But his kids would still have been alive, and if Winston is as passionate about superheroes as he seems to be here, did he not ever try to reach out to superheroes until this moment? Is that really what you want me to believe? What, is it because he just happened to be in the exact area as where the battle was unfolding this time? Because A, that's extremely convenient as we went over earlier, and B, that shouldn't change anything. The Incredibles were involved in a very public battle at the end of the last movie that was televised for all to see. Seems like that would have been a great opportunity to talk to them about your plan for superheroes. No? Definitely way better than right now, because then you'd be riding the high of people's support of superheroes as opposed to actively pushing back against the wave of resistance. Oh wait, is it because you're yet another thing we're adding to the list of random crap added into the sequel that cannot work synonymously with the story of the first film, and that you didn't actually exist until yesterday as evidenced by the blatant lack of a Devtech building on the shoreline? That's lovely. The hits just keep on coming. Anyway, we're now getting to the actually emotionally scarring part of this emotionally scarring backstory. See, on a dark and stormy night, there was a break-in, and this galaxy brain decided that rather than going into the safe room, the best course of action was to use his emergency phones to call in the Wonder Pets, but because superheroes had just been made illegal, nobody was there to answer, and so the robbers shot and killed him. There are so many problems with what I just said, it's almost too much to process, and this is a very big deal, because this scene is the crux of the narrative, not only because it leads Winston to start down his path to superhero liberation, but also because it is going to define the villain's entire motivation. So first of all, all, he calls for superhero help when he absolutely should have known that superheroes had just been made illegal. What's that? You think maybe he missed the news somehow? Well, I'm sorry to say that isn't the case. Winston clearly says that.
He was heartbroken when you were all forced to go underground.
If he was heartbroken about the news that they were forced underground, then obviously he would have been cognizant of their illegality when the break-in happened, and yet still consciously chose to call for superheroes anyway. Moron. Even if he somehow spontaneously contracted temporary amnesia and forgot about that earth-shattering news story, he still shouldn't have gone for the phones, because even if they were in a position to be able to help, they would not have been able to get there in time to prevent the robbers from killing you. But also, that wouldn't even have been a problem in the first place if the robber had just not shot you, which I know sounds self-evident and kind of pointless to say, but just hear me out for a second. If the robber's goal was simply to get in, steal some items, and then get out, why was their immediate course of action to shoot him? The repercussions for committing murder are exponentially more significant than the repercussions for robbery. You'd think that if they had half a brain, they'd only want to open fire on the residents of the home unless absolutely necessary, yet when they walk into this room, the dad isn't even looking at them and their gut instinct is just to shoot him. Now, in fairness, I suppose you could counter this by saying that these particular robbers were just trigger-happy hotheads, but in that case, all I'd have to say is, boy, how inconvenient is it that the Devors got robbed by the stupidest, most carefree robbers on the planet. But also, none of this would have ever been a problem at all if you guys had just put the emergency phones inside the goddamn safe room. This isn't rocket science. You could have hidden in the safe room while also calling for help at the same time. Boom, it's over. We win. Game over. We've killed 2 birds with 1 stone, and all it took was basic common sense planning for where to place these phones. But no, because everybody's an idiot and made the stupidest possible decisions every step of the way. Winston's dad is shot and killed, and his mom dies a few months later from the heartbreak and shock, and with how significant this little incident is for the story, I cannot overstate how massive of a problem it is that so much about the sequence of events doesn't make any sense at all. Okay, moving on. Now that Winston has provided the proper backstory explaining that in the absence of their father to be able to run the company, he and Evelyn stepped up to the plate, with the former being the operator and the latter being the designer, and now their company is in the position to make some wrong things right. He then goes on to explain that the main reason the superheroes are made illegal is because of how people perceive their actions, and that all people see of what they do is the destruction caused by the villains and the superheroes left at the scene of the crime, not the lives they saved or the damage they prevented. Thus, Winston says that he can't actually testify to the events of the Underminer today,
because I didn't see it.
which is just really? Nobody saw what happened today, because you were literally right there, 2 feet away from the heat of the action, and countless witnesses would have seen what was going on. If nobody else, then at the very least the people whose lives they saved would have seen what happened. The woman in the car, the elderly lady, the bystanders, many people's lives were saved today because of the Incredibles, and they absolutely would have been able to testify about that on any given news segment to come to their defense. Also, the implication behind this reasoning is that people intrinsically link the destruction to the Incredibles and assume that they caused it. But the only way that could ever make any sense is if the entire world was brain dead. Did you all forget about the Underminer publicly and clearly declaring war on humanity? All this destruction was caused by his drill, not the Incredibles. There's no way anybody with a 1/10 of a brain came to the conclusion that they were responsible for what happened today. Winston specifically says,
people don't see the fight or what led up to it. They see what politicians tell them to see. They see destruction, and they see you.
What are you talking about?
No, like, actually, what are you talking about? Of course they saw what led up to it. A very large crowd of people was present at the elementary school. People's cars were destroyed by the Underminer's drill. This narrative would never have been spun to the vast majority of people when there are witness testimonies to the contrary. And even if you are solely referring to people who had no affiliation with what happened today and just watched this happen on the evening news, there's no way you're going to get me to believe that more news stations are running the narrative of superheroes destroyed City Hall as opposed to a giant drill emerged out of nowhere, blew up 4 buildings, robbed the bank, and then almost destroyed City Hall before being stopped by the Incredibles. Especially since we learned earlier that apparently the Underminer is not a new threat and Bob already knew him from years ago, so would people not already be familiar with the Underminer's history of villainy? This doesn't make any sense. There's no point in presenting a situation where people are this woefully misinformed about the facts when all it does is break your story even more. Unless, of course, you wanted to tackle the idea of people whose only view view of the world is what news outlets tell them. Once again, there is a story there. You can do something with that. But is Incredibles 2 going to? Take a wild guess. All they do is pay lip service to the idea, and because of that, the story is once again dealt even more damage as we continue to parrot around this ridiculous idea that the Incredibles are in any way to blame for all this destruction. We already went over this. The logic you are trying to use to prove that is broken. But whatever. Winston's plan is to change people's perceptions by embedding tiny cameras into their supersuits, which the movie wants to make sure you know Evelyn designed herself, wink wink, nudge nudge, twist villain incoming, and then sharing the footage they record while doing good deeds with the world so people can see how beneficial superheroes really are for their society, which as I've already explained should be pointless given how the first film ended, but forget that movie. It's old and lame and the humans look weird and nobody liked it. We're finally making it so that now the superheroes have a chance to become legal again, and apparently Winston has enough friends in high places to have the assistance of resources, lobbyists, worldwide connections, and insurance.
Insurance is key.
Oh, is it now? What a fascinating thing to say because it sure doesn't seem like your house was insured at all. And thus concludes Winston's PowerPoint presentation, and Bob is over the moon excited about being able to get back out there, but oh no! Bob isn't actually the one that Winston wants to participate in this mission. He wants Helen to take the stage as Elastigirl, citing her as being their best play because Evelyn ran a cost-benefit analysis on their superhero careers and she came out in the lead, with the fear being that Mr. Incredible would wind up making a big, destructive mess and they don't want to test the idea that insurance will pay for everything. Which is sound reasoning on paper. I just hope we don't run into anything later in the movie that seems to be at odds with the idea that Elastigirl is a self-explanatory master at saving people's lives without making a mess. Because that would make things really awkward if that were the case. Also, why exactly did you bother calling all three superheroes here when you only actually wanted to get into business with one of them? A good question for the movie as a whole, honestly. Why is everybody else even here at all? But I suppose we'll come back to that later. More on topic. What's the point of hosting a meeting with all of them when you only want to talk to one? Oh, what's that? Winston clarifies that Elastigirl is only their first move?
For our first move, well, Elastigirl is our best play.
And that the other heroes will end up having work to do when she gets back? Yeah, well, we'll see how that works out. But that's not the big problem with this scene. The issue here is that, while Lucius congratulates Helen for being the one they want to step up and take this new job with a friendly fist bump to the shoulder, Bob's response is...
I mean, she's good. She really a credit to her, but, you know. You know.
Who are you? I'm sorry, but this is just not Bob's character. The crux of his development in the first movie was all about learning that he couldn't solve every problem by himself. And even then, his desire to be the leading man to heroically charge into battle when the on-the-droid attacks wasn't born out of some selfish desire to always be the star of the show, or because he didn't think his wife was capable of handling threats by herself. It's because he couldn't bear the thought of losing them again and wouldn't have been strong enough to handle the loss, as he learned earlier when he genuinely thought his family had been murdered basically right in front of his eyes when there was nothing he could do to protect them. That's the reason why he wanted his family to stay behind initially. He spent the entire movie chasing down the glory days of his superhero career and got so swept up in the nostalgia rush he lost sight of the thing in his life that he cared about most, his family, which is the final lesson he has to learn, that he can't and doesn't have to tackle these types of problems by himself, and allows every member of the Incredibles to work together, side by side, to take down a threat that only a team like themselves could ever have stood a chance at defeating, which remains consistent through the end of the movie as the Underminer rises up and Bob shows no resistance to, and even seems to outright support the idea of, his family bringing their skill sets together to fight crime because he had overcome his desire to always be the sole #1 hero all the time. Then we jump to Incredibles 2, where suddenly he's a whiny little baby throwing a fit over not being picked for the superhero kickball team.
Better than me?
Even going so far as to directly imply he's a way better superhero than her, only saying that,
I mean, she's good,
as an attempt to save face after the fact. Why did you do this? What was the reasoning behind it? I know you wanted this movie to be all about Elastigirl going on an adventure by herself, but you didn't have to revert Bob's character all the way back to the beginning of the first film to do it. Actually, no, even saying he was reverted to that point is extremely generous, because at least in the first movie there were understandable motivations behind his actions and he had a sense of confidence and bravado that was entertaining to watch. This isn't funny or engaging, it's cringe-inducing. But if you think I'm reading too much into this, let's jump over to the next scene, shall we? Because after being offered with the opportunity of a lifetime, Helen says she doesn't know what to do about it. Then we cut all the way to the point where the Pars are back at the motel and they're only now continuing their conversation about this. They apparently didn't talk about it at all in the car ride home or even in the room beforehand. Really? Whatever. So what's Helen's reasoning for feeling conflicted about whether or not to accept this offer? Especially given how confidently she claimed their days of being superheroes were over as of about 1 hour ago? Well, you see, After cycling through a bunch of nonsense reasons that Bob rightfully calls out as being stupid, she finally says that it's not a good time for her to leave because Dash is struggling with homework and Violet's getting ready for her big day with Reskin and Tony. But then Bob, as a Toy Story 4 level Freudian slippery, says,
"You've got to, so that we can be supers again."
And just in case his motivations here weren't clear enough, Helen goes ahead and full-on spells it out for you.
So you can have that choice.
All right, yes, so I can have that choice.
So, yeah, if you thought I was reading too much into that last scene and being too hard on Bob's characterization, there you go. Bob's priority here isn't so that his wife can be a superhero again, or so that she can get her chance to shine in the spotlight, or making sure that his kids can, not be illegal. Nope. Instead, you have him admit point blank that the reason he wants Helen to take the job is so that he can have the choice to become a superhero again. Why would you have him say this? This completely and totally goes against everything his character became by the end of the first movie. They literally have him struggle, visibly, audibly wrestle with the very concept that Helen would do a great job on her mission.
And you'll do a great job.
That was excruciating to watch.
Oh, you don't say, movie. That was, in fact, excruciating to watch because I'm watching a character I wound up empathizing with quite a lot in The Incredibles devolve into an immature toddler. Don't you just love it so much when Pixar sequels completely assassinate their old characters? Yeah, me too. It's actually my favorite thing in the whole wide world, honestly. And again, I don't understand why the dialogue was written this way. It's clear that they wanted to make Elastigirl the protagonist. I get that. But making that story decision did not inherently necessitate the assassination of Bob's character. And if you wanted him to put up some resistance to the idea of her going on this mission, you know what would have made for a really compelling conversation? Having him actively rooting for her to take the job to help their family, and specifically their kids, but have him sound audibly hesitant to encourage her to accept the offer, which then causes Helen to push back against that phony persona, similar to the end of the first movie where she slowly whittles him down until his true motivations emerge, and have the real reason why he's reluctant for her to leave be because he's afraid he won't be able to look after the kids by himself. As a gentle reminder, he committed to wanting to be a better father at the end of the first movie, remorseful that he almost missed his greatest adventure. Why not have that be the core of his character for the sequel? If you wanted to make this an Elastigirl-centric movie and abandon the idea of the entire family fighting together, which if you haven't already noticed, is the direction this film is headed, and basically everybody else besides her is going to be entirely ignored and get basically nothing to do, which was a terrible writing choice for a movie named after The Incredibles as a collective unit. But if you wanted to go down this route, that would have been the perfect direction to take his character. Because he undervalued his family and really never spent all that much time with them outside of the brief Life's Incredible Again montage, he's never had to deal with parenting the kids all by himself without Helen around, so it would be perfectly understandable for him to undergo anxiety about doing so. That would be in character for Bob, while also giving him something substantive and satisfying to overcome. But no, you didn't even bother with that. In fact, you have him explicitly say that,
"I'll watch the kids, no problem. Easy."
Easy, huh? You're adorable.
As if it's not going to be a big deal at all. Becoming a better father isn't even a minor thought in his mind, but making sure he can be the big strong hero again absolutely is, because apparently none of the development he underwent in the first movie meant anything at all. God damn it. And so, with our heroes set off down their main quest for the movie, this is going to be our stopping point for the day. Well, we've definitely made much more progress in a shorter amount of time than we did during the Toy Story 4 series, so at the very least we can say that it's not as bad as Toy Story 4, but that doesn't mean it's not still immensely painful to watch. Despite having only just broken out of the first act of the film, we've already had significant breaks across the plot, world building, thematic messaging, and characters. Both Bob and Helen have already underwent significant regression, and it has been made crystal clear that everything meaningful to happen in the first movie didn't matter, because it's essentially been erased and the status quo reset accordingly. And yet, this is still the best the characters are going to look throughout the entirety of Incredibles 2. Their competence, character development, and moral principles are only going to be further annihilated as we progress throughout this trilogy of videos tearing the film apart. After all, we haven't even been introduced to the Screenslayer yet, and once they make themselves known and the main plot of the second act gets underway for both Helen and Bob, it's all downhill from there. So hopefully you've enjoyed this short little introduction to the broken world of Incredibles 2, and fear not, I'll be back same time next week for part 2, and you're gonna want to mark your calendars for that, because trust me when I say that the worst has yet to come. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you're looking for a place to discuss this and other movies in the interim between parts of the series, then you may want to consider joining my Discord. There's also a channel there dedicated entirely to to be providing updates on the production of my upcoming series, so you can expect progress reports of the next part over the course of the next week. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed the video, and hope to see you all next week for the middle chapter of how Incredibles 2 destroyed everything. Goodbye!